Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I guess that'll help. Huh? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Huh? Okay, anyway. I gotta tell you, I hate to break the news to you, but I am not a storyteller. And I thought so before I got here, but after hearing Sue, I know I am not a storyteller. What do they say? What do they say? TATF? What is that? TATF? Tough act to follow. I mean, what can I do? I mean, should I tap dance? What? I don't know. But, like I said, I'm not a storyteller, but I do have a story to tell. And the only story that I know, it's the only story I know. It's my story, and I'm going to tell it. So, it all begins in Chicago, 1947. It's a big year. What happened big in 1947? There's a new movie out about one thing that happened big.
Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson, there you go. Jackie Robinson broke into the major leagues. There's a lot of stuff happened in 1947. But one of the things that happened was me. Right? On the south side of Chicago. And this is a picture of the cover of my book. You know where that is? One, it's on the south side of Chicago. But you don't have to answer now, but think about it. That's an important picture of an important place on the south side of Chicago. So I was born there, and I wasn't born in a integrated neighborhood, south side of Chicago. What Sue was saying about the fact that the neighborhoods were segregated, by that time, yeah, they were segregated. And what she said about the fact that Nate told her that they weren't always segregated, I found that out while writing this book that I have here. This is the book. And I found it out, and I said, wait a minute, how come, I thought racial progress happened like it just like happened over a period, and every period was better than the last period, right? I thought that's the way it happened, but when I started writing this book, I found out, no, as Sue said, that's not the way it happened. And so my life has been dedicated over the last 20 years to trying to find out, well, what happened? How do we get to the place that we're in, and how do we get out? So I started doing research, and I started thinking, what is it that makes this country, this city, so segregated? And people say, well, hey, we already know what it is. Racism is human nature. Birds of a feather flock together, right? I mean, it's just, you don't even have to think about it. This is just human nature. This is the way it's always been and always will be. So, my story started in 1947, and for the first 45 years of my life, I basically believed that story. The story that I'd been told, the story that was so obvious and well understood that you didn't even have to ask the question anymore. It's just human nature. Everybody knows that, don't they? But about 20 years ago, after spending 30-some years in advertising, I started to actually do research and try to find out, well, really, is racism human nature? Is that really the story? and I started to read and think about racism. As a matter of fact, it was one of the best ideas I ever had, and I had lots of good ideas in the air game. That's what I did. I came up with ideas for McDonald's, for Coke, for television commercials, for outdoor billboards, for radio spots, whatever. I had ideas, that's what I did. But the best idea I ever had was about 20 years ago, 1993. I had started to notice that the advertising agencies that I worked at, that I had been one of the first black people to work at, that I got a job at 3 months after Dr. King was killed in Memphis, and the corporate America opened itself up after the riots and the turmoil. They opened themselves up for the first time to unwhites, and I got in. I started to realize in about 1985 that that period was gone. Even though I was one of the few who had gotten in that door was no longer open. And a lot of people, a lot of those ad agencies went white again, just like Nate said about the neighborhoods and the fact that there had been one thing that happened that you thought was progress, or that you thought was the new paradigm, and then it went 2 steps forward, 5 steps back. So by 1985, the advertising agency business was resegregating itself. By 93, I had enough of it. I was one of the few blacks still working, but even me, who had worked at 6 of the top 10 advertising agencies in the country, all white ad agencies, I would go into these ad agencies in 1990, 91, and the receptionists would look at me like, what are you doing here? I was working as a freelancer by then. I was working for myself, and I would go in on a freelance basis and work for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, work on a project and then leave. But I would go in and I started noticing that the people there were whiter than ever. They were like Mayberry in a snowstorm. White. I'm talking about white. Right? And so I say, wait a minute, what's going on? This is going backwards. We're supposed to be making progress. And so I started to actually talk about and write about racism in the advertising agency business. I wrote an article for the first long form thing I've ever written. Up to that point, the only thing I had written headlines and text copy for print ads and 30-second commercials. I had probably never written more than 75 words in anything in my life. But because of racism in advertising, or my feelings about things going backwards, I wrote an article. I called a publisher in New York, a magazine publisher that was one of the biggest publishers of graphic design, communications design magazine called Print Magazine. I called them up one day and I said, hey, guess what? I'm going to write an article about racism in advertising. Now, this is an international design magazine. They're not used to wanting to talk about racism anyplace, especially not in the business that they make their money on. But I was in luck. I said, look, I want to write an article. I want to call it The Invisible Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. Now, what is that? What's that about? That's going. Okay, anybody who knows The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit was a book by Sloan Wilson. It was about an advertising kind of guy, white guy, advertising PR type guy, really. That was a book, Sloan Wilson, in the 50s. Invisible Man was another book in the 50s. Well, I kind of mashed them up and came up with Invisible Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. And evidently the headline worked because I hadn't written anything, but she said, okay, do it. And so I wrote a 13,000-word article about African Americans in advertising with pictures. I took a lot of the work of different people, myself included, and I put that in color in the magazine to show the work. But I did research And I found that of the top 25 advertising agencies in the country, only just a little less than 1% of the professionals working in the creative departments, writing and designing ads, were of color, black, I mean. And it didn't take, I said, well, how did you do that kind of research? I mean, that's pretty involved. I didn't have to do that much. All I had to do was get on the phone to people. I knew most of the black, I knew all of them in Chicago. Right? And then I would say, hey, do you know anybody in New York that works at blah, blah, blah? And within a couple of weeks, I knew everybody black who was working as a professional creating advertising in the top 25 advertising agencies. So that was the research and the basic fact of the article I wrote. So I said, wow, this is pretty interesting. I got really good response. As a matter of fact, I started losing work immediately. Right? And you get it? So I started losing work real fast. But Advertising Age, which is considered the Bible of the ad business, actually found out about the story I was writing. I think I told them, as a matter of fact. And they actually interviewed me and a guy named Joe Winsky. He was a senior editor at Ad Age. Even before my article came out, he interviewed me, and he broke a cover story in Advertising Age called Dirty Little Secret. And he took a copy of an ad a prototypical ad that I had done for that particular purpose. And it had a door, a massive door of an ad agency, very slick door. All the ad agencies are slick. That's one of the first things. You want to be an ad agency, you got to look slick, right? And I had a picture of an ad agency reception door. And hanging on the door was, guess what? A sign that said, whites only. And the headline said, this sign might as well be hanging on the door of every major ad agency in America. And guess what? I got even less work. So I had to kind of find a change of venue, another way to make a living. And just then I had even a better idea. I said, well, since as an African-American man in America, I have to, whether I want to or not, spend at least a third to half, 3/4, depending on what week it is, thinking about what? Being an African-American in America, about racism. This is just one of the things you got to do. One of the benefits, the perks of not being an African-American is that you don't have to think about racism. But if you're African-American, you do. But most of us, we try to not think about it if we can avoid it. But we can't avoid it. And we may go for a day or 2 days not thinking about it, having a good time, being like everybody else. And then we go to a restaurant. We try to catch a cab. And all of a sudden it all comes back and we get mad. We get upset. This is not fair. This is our lives. And I was just like everybody else. I'd go for a day or two maybe, just an average guy, person. But then I'd be reminded that I was not an average guy, not just an ordinary American. I was an African American. So I said, well, instead of me always trying to avoid thinking about it or getting mad, getting angry when I had to think about it, and getting angry at myself and other blacks who I didn't think responded the way I would respond, celebrities, who were Uncle Toms or too militant or whatever. Instead of that, and using all of this energy for that, instead of me trying to avoid the issue of race and only reacting when I had to, why didn't I use my creativity to confront the issue of race? Why didn't I use my creativity to actually try to solve the issue, to learn what the issue really was? And from that day, which was about 20 years ago, till this, that's what I've been doing. I've been studying and creating, and stuff I did for the Interfaith Housing Center was that. The Race Question radio show was that. All of this stuff is using what I know how to do, which is visual and verbal or written communications, succinct communications. That's what I know how to do. So I started doing that. And guess what? I haven't changed the world. I haven't saved America yet. But I don't have that problem anymore about getting angry with racism, waiting for the next shoe to drop before I jump up and get mad. Every day is a challenge, but it's interesting. It's a creative challenge. And this book is a result of that. Taking what I know how to do, what I love to do, and turning it into something positive, something that if anybody, white, black, or other, looked at it, it would help in them thinking about race, racism, human beings, and whatever. And that's what I do. But also, I want to wrap it up. I got 3 minutes. You're good, Vicki. I got 3 minutes. And in the piece that Arif said at the end, that I had done, I was working on a new book. And the only thing that was wrong with what he said was because I found out after I had given the information that something had changed. I submitted my book as a Kindle single, Amazon. And I submitted a proposal about a month ago. And I wanted it to be a Kindle single because I had already sold lots of these books through Amazon. I've had very good experience with Amazon. And I figured they would be perfect, and the Kindle single was, I wanted it to be a short book. I wanted it to be something that young people might even pick up. You know what I'm saying? And their format is very short, fiction or nonfiction. So that's what I wanted to do. And guess what? They rejected it. Amazon rejected it. I was so pissed. I said, what? I said, you gotta be kidding. You rejected this with all the crap that you got on there? You rejected mine? I said, well, look, who made that decision? I want to take it all the way up to Jeff. Jeff Bezos is the guy who founded Amazon. I said, I want Jeff to give me that decision. Of course, they said, hey, we don't have to take it any place. That's it. But I'm going to show you right now, tonight, the cover of this new book. And it is the book that I think that actually does what I really started out to do, which is to solve the race problem in America. It actually does it.
Pretend you're not seeing that.
What is it? What is it?
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
There. After you do that, then we can talk about pictures for a minute.
Oh, okay. I want you to see this book. Here it is. This is the size of it, 56 pages. Race Man Answers America's Toughest Race Questions, and it does. And I want everybody in this room to get ready because it's going to be out in a couple of months. And I have the answer. You're laughing, but you won't when you get the book. And I want to talk about a picture. Go to the next picture. This picture. I want to ask one question. Which one is me? This one here? Is that me? Who says that one? How many hands? Who says this guy? Who says this guy that's behind the black hat? Who says that guy? Who says that guy? Who says this guy? Okay, the lady over here who raised her hand, that's me. Thank you. Oh, Gail reminded me, I gotta tell you where this picture is. This is a famous, who anybody?
DuSable Museum.
No,
Southside Community Arts Center.
no, but I got a great picture of me in front of the Southside Community Arts Center. I wish I had it. I've got it in the book, it's actually in this book.
We're Operation.
Okay,
Should we hold?
no, but the thing that makes this, the thing that makes this picture interesting and unique, it was taken in 1941. And it was taken in front of a church, a famous church on the south side of Chicago, a black church, in 1941, Easter Sunday. And the interesting thing is that it's a black church, but before it was a black church, it was a Jewish synagogue. No, it's not Operation. That was a Jewish synagogue, but there were a number of churches that were Jewish, but this church in particular was a Jewish synagogue. And the thing that makes it special and unique is that it was designed and built by probably the one most famous architect in Chicago and his partner, two of the most famous architects in Chicago. Louis Sullivan, Adler and Sullivan. A lot of people think this is the Auditorium Theater because it has the same motif. But it is Pilgrim Baptist Church, which is the home, considered the home of what? Gospel music. Thomas A. Dorsey was the choir director at this church for 35 years. Even when I went to Pilgrim when I was like a teenager. So there you go. There you have it.